Grace? Baby, why are you sitting in the dark?
Who is Patroness? And why do her children call you Daddy?
If you would just let me explain.
Explain what, David? 3 years, 50 million naira, pictures of you with children I didn't know existed.
Patience is Daniel's wife.
Your brother? David, your brother has been dead for 10 years. How can a dead man have a wife you're secretly sending money to?
Ifioma is my daughter, Grace.
Grace Adeyemi found the bank statement by accident. She wasn't looking for it. She was only searching for her son's birth certificate inside David's old briefcase, the brown leather one he kept under the bed and never opened in front of her. But her fingers brushed against a folded paper, and something about the way it had been hidden, tucked deep inside a side pocket, wrapped in a plastic bag like a secret too heavy to be left loose, made her stop. She unfolded it slowly. Her husband, David Adeyemi, a man she had been married to for 6 years, a man who prayed with her every morning before work, a man who told her every single day that she was the only woman his heart had ever truly known. That man had been sending 400,000 naira every month for the past 3 years to an account that did not belong to her, did not belong to his mother, and did not belong to anyone she had ever heard of. The name on the account was Patience Okafor. Grace sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, the paper trembling in her hand, her heart pounding so loudly she thought the neighbors might hear it through the wall. 400,000. Every month. For 3 years. That was almost 15 million naira. She thought of every time David said money was tight. Every time he told her they couldn't afford to renovate the kitchen, couldn't afford a bigger car, couldn't afford to send her younger sister to a better school. She thought of how she had quietly given up her own dreams, taken extra tailoring jobs at night, just to help stretch what little they had. And all along, somewhere in Lagos, there was a woman named Patience receiving more money every month than Grace's entire tailoring business made in 3. Her hands went cold. She did not cry. Not yet. Instead, she did something she had never done in 6 years of marriage. She opened David's phone while he was in the shower, and she searched the name Patience. What she found stopped her breath completely. Photos. Dozens of them. A woman, beautiful, maybe in her early 30s, standing in front of a modest bungalow with 2 children, a boy who looked about 7, and a girl who could not have been older than 4. And in almost every photo, David was there too. Smiling, holding the little girl on his shoulders, laughing with the boy over a football. In one picture, dated only 3 weeks ago, the little girl had her small arms wrapped around David's neck, and underneath the photo, a caption from Patience read, "Daddy came to see us today." The children would not stop smiling. "Thank you for everything, as always." Daddy. Grace's stomach turned to stone. She heard the bathroom door creak open behind her. She did not turn around. She simply sat there, staring at the phone, at a life her husband had been living right under her nose, a second family, hidden in plain sight, financed with money he claimed they did not have. "Grace." David's voice came from behind her, warm as always, completely unaware. "Baby. Why are you sitting in the dark?" She finally turned to look at him, the man she loved, the man she thought she knew completely. "Who is Patience?" she asked quietly. "And why do her children call you Daddy?" To understand how Grace got here, you have to go back 9 years, to a wedding in Ibadan where she first met David Adeyemi. Grace was 23 then, working as an apprentice under a popular tailor named Mama Bisi, sewing asoebi for a cousin's wedding. David was 26, freshly returned from working 2 years in Port Harcourt, tall, soft-spoken, the kind of man who held doors open without being asked and who listened more than he talked. They met because David spilled a full cup of Zobo on Grace's freshly sewn gown, and instead of apologizing and disappearing into the crowd like most men would, he stayed. He helped her dab the stain with a napkin, apologizing the whole time, and when that didn't work, he simply said, "Then let me pay for another one. It's only fair, I ruined a masterpiece." Grace had laughed despite herself. "You don't even know if it's a masterpiece. You just want to apologize and leave." "No," David said, his eyes steady on hers in a way that made her chest flutter. "I want to apologize and stay." He did stay. For the rest of that wedding, And then for every weekend after that, finding small reasons to visit a Baden, a cousin's birthday, a friend's introduction ceremony, anything that would put him near her again. Grace's mother did not approve at first. A man with no permanent job in the city, always traveling up and down? Be careful, Grace. But David was patient. He worked hard, saved carefully, and within 2 years he had opened a small logistics company in Lagos, moving goods between states. It wasn't wealthy, but it was honest, and it was growing. He proposed to Grace on the same spot at Mama Bisa's shop where they first met, holding a small velvet box in one hand and a fresh bottle of Zobo in the other. "I owe you a replacement," he said, kneeling. "For the dress, and for my heart. Both are yours now, if you'll have them." She said yes before he even finished the sentence. Their wedding was beautiful, modest, but full of joy. Grace's mother cried through the entire ceremony, finally convinced that this quiet, steady man truly loved her daughter. David's mother, Mama Adeyemi, a strong-willed woman from Ijebu, blessed the union with tears in her eyes and whispered to Grace, "Take care of my son. He carries more than he shows." Grace did not understand that warning then. She would understand it years later, sitting in the dark with a phone full of secrets in her trembling hands. Their first 3 years of marriage were good ones, not perfect, but good. They struggled with finances, like most young couples did, but they struggled together. David worked long hours growing his logistics business. Grace built her tailoring shop from a single sewing machine into a small but respected boutique. They had a son, Daniel, named after David's late older brother who had died years before Grace ever met the family. And that, the mention of David's late brother Daniel, would become the most important detail of this entire story. But Grace did not know that yet. All she knew, sitting in their bedroom 9 years after that wedding, was that the man she had built a life with had been hiding something enormous, and she intended to find out exactly what. "Who is Patience?" Grace repeated, her voice shaking now. "And why do those children call you Daddy, David?" David's face went through several expressions in the space of 2 seconds. Confusion, then alarm, then something that looked almost like relief, which only made Grace angrier. "Grace, it's not what you think. Don't." She stood up so fast the phone fell onto the bed. "Don't you dare tell me what I'm supposed to think. I found the statement, David. 400,000 naira, every month, for 3 years. 15 million naira to a woman I have never heard of, while you tell me we can't afford to fix the roof. While I sew until midnight to help my sister with school fees. And then I see pictures of you with her children, smiling, calling you daddy, and you want to tell me it's not what I think. If you would just let me explain." "Explain." Grace's voice cracked. "You've had 3 years to explain, David. 3 years where you could have told me anything, and instead you hid a bank statement inside a plastic bag like it was contraband. What kind of man does that to his wife?" David ran both hands over his face, and for the first time in their marriage, Grace saw him look truly, completely lost. "Patience is Daniel's wife," he said quietly. Grace blinked. "Daniel, your brother who died." "Yes. Your brother has been dead for 10 years, David. How can a dead man have a wife you're secretly sending 15 million naira to?" David sat down heavily on the bed, his shoulders sinking. "Because before Daniel died, he asked me to take care of her. And the children." "Children," Grace repeated, her voice rising again. "Plural. Daniel had children." "One," David said. "The boy, Emeka. His Daniel's son. The girl, Ifema, is." He paused, and something in his hesitation made Grace's heart drop even lower. "Is what, David?" He looked up at her, and his eyes were wet now, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ifema is mine." The room went completely silent. Grace felt the floor tilt beneath her, as if the entire house had shifted on its foundation. "Say that again," she whispered. "Ifema is my daughter, Grace." David's voice broke completely now. "She's 4 years old. And I have never told you, because I didn't know how, and every year that passed made it harder, and I am so sorry. I am so sorry." Grace did not hear the rest. She was already walking out of the room, out of the house, into the cold Lagos night, her mind replaying one sentence over and over. "Ifema is my daughter. 6 years of marriage. A son they had raised together. A life she thought was completely hers to share with one man. And somewhere in this same city, a 4-year-old girl existed who called her husband Daddy, born from a woman whose name Grace had never even heard until tonight. She had been right to be afraid. But she had been wrong about everything else. Grace did not go far. She sat in her car outside their gate for almost an hour, gripping the steering wheel, crying the kind of tears that come from somewhere deeper than sadness, somewhere closer to grief for a marriage she thought she understood. When she finally came back inside, David was sitting exactly where she left him, his face buried in his hands. He looked up when she entered, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked afraid of her, truly afraid, like a man waiting for a verdict. "Tell me everything," Grace said, her voice flat and cold. "From the beginning. And if you lie to me one more time, David, I promise you, I will leave this house tonight and I will not come back." David nodded slowly. He took a long breath, and he began. "Before I met you, when I was 24, I was in a relationship with a woman named Patience. We were together almost 2 years. It wasn't serious, we both knew that, but it happened, and Patience got pregnant. I wanted to do right by her, but my mother did not approve of her family. There was an old land dispute between our families that went back 2 generations, and she begged me not to marry into that house. I was young, and I was a coward, Grace. I gave Patience money for the pregnancy, but I distanced myself. I told myself I would still be a father, just not a husband. Efima was born, and I visited when I could, quietly, away from my mother's eyes." "And Daniel?" Grace asked, her voice tight. David's eyes filled again. "Daniel found out about Patience's pregnancy before anyone else did, because Patience came to him crying, asking for advice. She didn't know who else to trust. Daniel was a good man, Grace, the best man I ever knew. He told her he would help her, that whatever happened, her child would not grow up without a father figure, even if I was a fool about it. Over time, Daniel and Patience grew close. Not romantic, not at first, but he was always at her house, helping her, defending her name when people gossiped about a single mother. Eventually, it became something real between them. They never married formally because of the family dispute, but in every way that mattered, Daniel became her husband, and he raised Efima alongside his own son Emeka as if there was no difference between them." Grace pressed her hand against her mouth. "Then Daniel got sick," David continued, his voice shaking now. "Liver failure. Fast, brutal, nobody expected it. On his hospital bed, 2 days before he died, he held my hand and made me promise him one thing. He said, 'David, promise me you will take care of Patience and both children. Don't let anyone call Efima a bastard. Don't let anyone call Emeka fatherless. You owe them that much, and so do I promised him, Grace. I promised a dying man, and I have kept that promise every single month for the past 10 years, even after I married you, even after we had our own son. I never told you because I was ashamed of who I was before you, ashamed that I had a daughter I had never told you about, ashamed that my mother knew this whole story and made me swear never to speak of it because she still carries guilt over keeping us apart from Patience's family all those years ago." Grace sat down slowly across from him, her anger still present, but now tangled with something else, grief, confusion, and a strange, aching sympathy she did not want to feel yet. "You should have told me," she whispered. "Before we married. You should have told me, David." "I know," he said. "I know, and I am sorry. I was afraid you would leave." "I might still leave," Grace said quietly. "Not because of Efima. Not because of Patience. But because you let me build a life with you on top of a foundation I never agreed to." David said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The silence between them stretched long into the night, heavy with everything that had finally been spoken, and everything that still needed to be decided. The next morning, Grace did something David did not expect. She drove to his mother's house in Ijebu, alone, without telling him. Mema Adeyemi opened the door and froze the moment she saw Grace's face. She did not need to be told what had happened. She simply stepped aside and said, "Come in, my daughter. I think it is time we talked properly." They sat in the small parlor, the smell of fresh palm oil stew drifting in from the kitchen, the ceiling fan creaking overhead. Mema Adeyemi held Grace's hands in both of hers, her grip surprisingly strong for a woman in her 60s. "I owe you the truth, Grace, even more than my son does," she said. "It was my pride that caused all of this. Patience's grandfather and my late husband's father fought over land 30 years before any of these children were born. I carried that hatred like it belonged to me, and when David told me Patience was pregnant, I told him to walk away. I told him a child born outside marriage from that family would bring shame to this house." She wiped her eyes with the edge of her wrapper. "But Daniel, My first son. He did not carry my bitterness. He looked at that little girl and saw only a child who needed love, not a symbol of an old family quarrel. He gave Patience a home, a name for her children to hide behind, and a love I did not deserve to watch from a distance, because I had pushed it away myself. When he died, something in me broke, Grace. I realized my pride had cost my son the chance to raise his own family properly. Emeka is his blood son. Did David tell you that? And it nearly cost Efima a father's name too. I begged David to keep his promise to Daniel, but I also begged him never to tell you, because I was afraid you would see our family as cursed, full of secrets and shame. Grace's voice was barely a whisper. You let your son lie to his wife for 6 years to protect your pride. Yes, Mama Adeyemi said, without flinching. And it was wrong. I have prayed about this every single day, Grace. I am not asking you to forgive me today. I am only asking you to see that David has spent 10 years quietly trying to fix a mistake he made before he ever loved you, and that loving you never once made him stop loving his daughter. A good man does not abandon one family to build another. He finds a way, even an imperfect, painful way, to be faithful to both. Grace sat with that for a long moment, staring at her hands. I need to meet her, she finally said. Patience. And the children. Mema Adeyemi's eyes widened in surprise. Are you certain? No, Grace admitted. But I cannot keep hating a story I do not fully understand. The bungalow in Oja was smaller than Grace expected, neat, modest, with a small garden of pepper plants near the front gate. Patience opened the door before Grace even knocked, as if she had somehow known this day was coming. She was not what Grace expected either. Not glamorous, not threatening, just a tired, gentle-faced woman in her late 30s, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel, her eyes immediately filling with tears the moment she saw Grace standing there. You must be Grace, Patience said softly. I have wanted to meet you for years. I am so sorry it is happening like this. Inside, Grace saw the children. Emeka, now 17, tall and quiet, doing homework at a small table. And Efima, 4 years old, sitting on the floor with a coloring book, completely unaware that the woman standing in the doorway was about to change the shape of her small world forever. She has his eyes, Grace said quietly, watching the little girl. David's eyes. She has his laugh too, Patience said, smiling sadly. It used to break my heart, watching her laugh just like him when he wasn't even allowed to claim her properly because of his family's pride. David has never missed sending support, not 1 month in 10 years, even when his own business struggled. He has never missed a birthday. He calls every single day, even if it's just for 2 minutes between meetings. Whatever you think of how this started, Grace, I need you to know, that man has been a real father to my daughter, more than most men in this town are to children they openly claim. Grace felt her throat tighten. Why didn't you ever ask him to be public about it? Why hide for 10 years? Patience sat down slowly, her hands twisting in her lap. Because Daniel asked me not to embarrass David's marriage if he ever found a good wife. He said, let my brother build his family in peace. We will manage quietly, the way we always have. I respected that, even after Daniel died. I never wanted to be a secret that destroyed your home, Grace. I only wanted my children to have a father's love and a father's name when it mattered. School forms, hospital visits, the small things the world doesn't see but a child feels deeply. Efima looked up suddenly, noticing the stranger in the doorway, and smiled the wide, gaped smile of a child who had not yet learned to be afraid of complicated adult things. Are you Daddy's friend? She asked. Grace knelt down slowly, her heart aching in a way she did not expect. Something like that, she said softly. I think. I might be your friend too, if you'll let me. Efima nodded happily and went back to her coloring, as if the matter was already settled. The simple, uncomplicated grace of a child accepting love without conditions. Grace stood up, looked at Patience, and for the first time since discovering that bank statement, she felt something other than anger settle into her chest. Not forgiveness yet, but understanding. And understanding, she realized, was where forgiveness always had to begin. Word travels fast in Lagos, faster than anyone wants it to. Within 2 weeks, someone, Grace suspected it was a jealous business rival of David's named Bayo, a man who had lost a major logistics contract to David the previous year, had somehow learned fragments of the story and twisted them into the worst possible version. The rumor spread through their church and their estate like wildfire. David Adeyemi has a secret family. He has been cheating on his wife for years. He has an outside daughter he was hiding. No one mentioned Daniel. No one mentioned the promise on a dying man's hospital bed. No one mentioned 10 years of quiet, faithful financial support to a widow and her children. The story that spread was simple, scandalous, and cruel. Exactly the kind of story people love to repeat. Grace's own mother called her in tears. Is it true, Grace? Everyone in the market is saying your husband has another wife and children hiding in Oja. Why didn't you tell me? It's not what they are saying, Mama, Grace said, exhausted. It's complicated, but it's not what they are saying. Complicated is how shameless men explain themselves, her mother snapped. Come home, Grace. Bring Daniel. Leave that man before he disgraces you completely. That night, Bayo took the rumor one step further. He posted anonymously in a popular Lagos business WhatsApp group that David Adeyemi was a man who built his transport empire on lies and secret children, hinting, falsely, that David had even misused investor funds to support his outside family. This was the twist that turned a private heartbreak into a public crisis. Within days, 2 of David's biggest logistics contracts were suspended pending review of his business integrity. His company, the thing he had built from nothing over a decade, was suddenly at risk of collapsing, not because of anything he had actually done wrong financially, but because a lie, dressed convincingly enough, can destroy a reputation faster than the truth can defend it. David came home that evening looking like a man who had aged 5 years in a single day. They are trying to finish me, Grace, he said quietly, sitting at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. Bayo has wanted to destroy this business since I beat him for the Dangote distribution contract last year. Now he has the perfect weapon, and I built it for him myself, by keeping secrets I should have shared with my own wife. Grace stood there, watching her husband, a flawed man, a man who had hurt her deeply, but also a man who had quietly kept a sacred promise to his dying brother for 10 years without asking for credit or sympathy. She thought about Efima's gap-toothed smile. She thought about Patience's tired, honest eyes. She thought about everything she now understood that the gossiping crowd outside did not. And she made a decision that surprised even herself. Then we fight this together, she said. Not because I have forgiven everything yet, David. I haven't. But I will not let a liar like Bayo destroy 10 years of a dead man's wish, and I will not let him destroy my son's father over a story he doesn't even understand. They decided the only way to kill the rumor was to starve it of mystery. Secrets feed gossip. The truth, however painful, usually kills it. David called a small meeting. His pastor, 2 of his closest business partners, Grace's parents, and his mother. Patience agreed to come too, though her hands trembled the entire drive there, terrified of being publicly shamed after a decade of careful privacy. David stood in front of the room, Grace beside him, not holding his hand, not yet, but standing beside him, which in itself was a statement everyone in that room understood. 10 years ago, my brother Daniel made me promise to take care of a woman and 2 children, David began. One of those children is mine, born before I married Grace, from a relationship that ended before David and Patience ever planned to build a life together, but ended in a way that left a child who deserved love regardless of how complicated her beginning was. My brother loved that little girl as his own. He raised her alongside his biological son, and asked only one thing of me before he died: protect this family quietly, without scandal, without shame. I have done that every month for 10 years. I did not tell my wife, not because I was unfaithful to her, but because I was a coward about my past, and I let that cowardice almost cost me everything that matters. He turned slightly toward Grace. I have never once, in 6 years of marriage, been unfaithful to my wife. Every naira I sent to Oja was support for children, one of them mine by blood, raised by my late brother's love, not money spent on betrayal. I was wrong to hide it. I was wrong to let my mother's old pride silence a truth my wife deserved to know from the very beginning. But I will not let a jealous rival twist a story of loyalty and grief into something filthy, just to destroy my business and my family's name. The room was silent. Grace's father, a stern man of few words, finally spoke. Why should we believe any of this, David? A convenient story is easy to build. It was Patience who answered, stepping forward, her voice shaking but clear. Because I have the bank statements going back 10 years, sir. Because Daniel's death certificate lists me as next of kin, and there are family members in this very room who attended his burial and know I was at his side as his wife in every way except paper. Because my daughter calls a man daddy who has never once, in 4 years of her life, missed a school fee, a hospital bill, or a single birthday, even when his own marriage was struggling financially in the early years. I did not come here to break a family. I came here because I am tired of hiding a love story that started in grief and somehow became one of the most honest things I have ever witnessed. Grace's mother began to cry softly. Even David's harshest critic in the room, his business partner Mr. O'Yelleran, slowly nodded, his expression softening. "This is not the scandal Bayo described," Mr. O'Yelleran finally said. "This is something else entirely. This is a man who kept a promise no one asked him to keep, in a way the world will never reward, only judge." By the following week, with sworn affidavits, 10 years of financial records, and Patience's own public testimony shared carefully through trusted community channels, the truth overtook the rumor. Bayo's reputation, not David's, became the one in question, and his attempt at sabotage cost him 2 of his own major contracts when his dishonesty was exposed to the very business community he had tried to manipulate. David's company survived. But more than that, for the first time in 10 years, David no longer had to carry his secret alone. That night, after everyone had left, Grace and David sat together on their small back porch, the way they used to in the early years of their marriage, when life was simpler and secrets did not yet exist between them. "I'm not going to pretend this didn't break something in me," Grace said quietly. 6 years, David. I built my whole understanding of our marriage on a story that wasn't complete. "I know," he said. "And I will spend however long it takes proving to you that the parts one hid were about my shame, never about my love for you." Grace was quiet for a long moment, watching the stars struggling to shine through Lagos's hazy night sky. "I went to see Efima again yesterday," she finally said. David's head turned sharply toward her, surprised. "She asked me to braid her hair. She has your stubbornness, you know." She refused to sit still for almost 20 minutes. A small, disbelieving smile broke across David's face. "You went back? Alone?" "She's not the reason I'm hurting, David," Grace said. "She's a child who needs people around her who love her honestly. I cannot punish a 4-year-old for the mistakes the adults around her made. And Daniel, your brother sounds like he was a remarkable man. I wish I could have thanked him myself for loving a child the world would have called unworthy." Tears slid silently down David's face. "He was the best of us," he whispered. "I have spent 10 years trying to be half the man he was in that house, and I still fall short." "You don't fall short," Grace said softly. "You kept a promise to a dying man for 10 years without telling a single soul, without asking for praise, while still trying, clumsily, imperfectly, to build a life with me. That isn't failure, David. That's devotion stretched in a direction you never planned for." She reached over and took his hand for the first time since the confrontation 3 weeks earlier. His fingers tightened around hers immediately, desperately, like a man finally allowed to breathe after holding his breath for 10 years. "I'm not fully healed," Grace whispered. "I don't know how long that will take. But I am choosing to stay, David. Not because the world is watching, and not because it would be easier. I'm staying because underneath everything you hid, I still recognize the man who chased me up and down between Abadan and Lagos with a bottle of Zobo, trying to win my heart properly. I think that man is worth fighting for, even now." David pulled her into his arms, and for the first time in 3 painful weeks, Grace let herself cry, not from anger, not from grief, but from the exhausting, overwhelming relief of choosing to rebuild something instead of walking away from it entirely. A year later, on a warm Saturday afternoon, Grace stood in her own backyard watching Daniel, her son, 7 years old now, chase a football across the grass with Emeka, 18 and newly admitted into university, laughing the easy laughter of brothers who had only recently learned they were family. Efima, now 5, sat in Grace's lap, her small fingers playing with the beads on Grace's wrist, while Patience sat beside them, finally at ease in a home she had once been too afraid to imagine visiting. It had not been an easy year. There were arguments. There were nights Grace still cried over the 6 years of silence she had unknowingly lived through. There were moments David had to earn her trust back, one honest conversation at a time. Memar Adeyemi had spent months in quiet penance, finally releasing the old family pride that had cost her so much, formally welcoming Patience and the children into the family during a small, private ceremony that healed something that had been broken for over a decade. But here, in this backyard, surrounded by laughter that no longer needed to be hidden, Grace understood something she could not have understood a year earlier. A perfect marriage was never the absence of secrets, mistakes, or pain. A perfect marriage, if such a thing existed at all, was simply 2 people choosing, again and again, to build something honest out of whatever broken pieces life handed them. David walked over and sat beside her, watching their children, all of them, by blood and by love, playing together under the Lagos sun. "Do you regret staying?" he asked quietly. The same question he had asked her almost every week for the past year, still half expecting a different answer one day. Grace smiled, watching Efima giggle as Daniel finally let her join the football game. "I used to think love meant having no secrets at all," she said. "Now I think love means choosing each other even after the secrets come out, choosing to build something truer than what we had before. No, David. I don't regret staying. I regret that it took losing the illusion of perfection to find something far more real." David took her hand, the way he had on their wedding day, the way he had every difficult night over the past year of rebuilding, and together they watched their complicated, hard-won, beautifully imperfect family fill their backyard with laughter that, for the first time in 10 years, belonged to everyone, with nothing left to hide. The end.
What would you have done differently if you were Grace? Would you have walked away? Or you would have forgiven him just like Grace did? I would like to know your thoughts in the comments. Please share this story to someone that you feel needs to hear this. Like and comment. Thanks so much, my family. If you're new here, please subscribe. And if you're a returning subscriber, I love you with all my heart. Thanks so much. See you in the next one.